Welcome everybody to another episode of MoCast.
Hey.
Yes, I will be introducing the rogues today because I'm
because it's Flame's favorite spec secretly.
the only one that's not leveled yet, but that's fine. That's not important. Today we're gonna be talking about, you guessed it, Outlaw Rogue. I mean, you've read the title, but we're gonna have some really cool guests. And starting from my right, your other left.
We have Guy, Mystler, and the Red Rogue, but we'll let the folks talk a little bit about themselves, and then we're gonna get into it and discuss Outlaw Rogue. Yeah. So, Guy, what's up with you, man? Who are you? What do you do?
I play a lot of Outlaw Rogue. I played it pretty much like since the start of BFA, when I realized that it's the only fun rogue spec in BFA. So I basically made it the entire expansion. I found like a lot of like weird optimization for like weird talents, like loaded dice, like stacking brigand splits. I kind of just like find stuff that is like marginally better, and then demand people should use it because damage is good. So, and I hang out a lot in the Discord a lot. So
one of the problems.
I ready for HC, which is like that's cool.
Yeah, man. Guy is one of the prominent members of the Ravenhold Discord, especially the Outlaw boys over there. And another prominent figure is Mystler. And Mystler, can you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Of course I can. I'm one of the Ravenhold theory crafters, and I've been working on making sure that the simulations, the models in simulation craft are mostly as accurate as possible since Legion, and I dabble in all kinds of other theory crafting projects as well. So I've been working on background stuff for sites like Hero Damage, and I'm currently also maintaining the WoW head guides.
And also Blood Mallet, if I'm not mistaken.
And not directly, but we're running Hero Damage, which is kind of the others thing next to Blood Mallet.
Because I knew you were.
But we've had some cooperations, like when I made my April Fool's joke for Hero Damage.
All right. And last but not least, Mr. Red Rogue, who I personally want to thank, because before I started getting into any Outlaw Rogue research, of course I looked up on YouTube and searched for an Outlaw Rogue guide. And what do you know? Among the many results, I found Mr. Red Rogue, which I will have to make a parenthesis here as well. Actually, Red Rogue was mentioned by one of our guildmates, Mr. Lorx. And also, one of our community members, because when we did the podcast with the WoW community figures, when it was that for one, he basically said, "Hey man, you got to bring on the Red Rogue. He's super nice and stuff, and he plays the rogue, and he has a cute little doggy in his yellow shit." All right, I'm gonna shut up. So, Red Rogue, please tell the people a little bit about yourself, man.
Hi, I'm Zera, the Red Rogue. Either way is fine as far as name-wise. I've been a rogue main since late 2005, back when it was still combat, because prior to actual talent specializations and just having talent trees. When the Legion beta came out, I got onto that as soon as I could. By blind luck, obviously, with how RNG beta keys can be, but picked up the Outlaw Rogue spec then and basically use it exclusively for any of the higher content I do. I mainly do nowadays Mythic Plus. I used to do a lot of cutting edge raiding. I'm more into the Mythic Plus scene now, as I find that a little bit more fun, but yeah, basically Outlaw Rogue all the time. I try to play all three, but Outlaw is where I spend like 99% of my slash played time. So yeah.
Beautiful. And by the way, guys, you're gonna get all of the links for everybody, like for Mystler, for Red Rogue. I don't know, Guy will have anything to put in there. It's gonna be in the description. Okay. So everybody, you have to check the boys out. Once the podcast is over, check the boys out. So really cool dudes. But interesting enough, right? We have Guy, who started on Outlaw at the beginning of BFA. Gonna get to that. We have Mystler, who has been a long time role player, let's just say. And Red Rogue, who was playing like 2005, Jesus Christ, Combat Rogue. We have a lot to talk about. So I guess this segues in perfectly within the first chapter of our journey. And for each and every one of you, the question would be, what was the best iteration of Outlaw/Combat Rogue? In which expansion? And why? Let's start off with Guy, because it's the natural order of positioning, and we'll carry on from there.
So I'm like a little biased because I started like playing WoW in Legion, and I played healer in all of Legion. So I basically only played rogue from like BFA onwards.
That's perfect.
So I didn't play too much of the Legion iteration because I thought it was dumb. I thought it was a dumb looking spec, and I was never going to play it. And then I started playing it. It looked very dumb because I just wanted to play, like daggers and stuff. But yeah, I started playing it a lot in BFA. I personally prefer the Shadowlands version right now. I think the change to roll the bones is like kind of cool. I think the removal of the spam rerolling playstyle generally like lands better with people. I think conduits like count the odds played better than basically anything the spec has had, other than maybe Wits and BFA. But that one has been like nerfed like 50 times, and it was kind of overpowered. So I think the current iteration has problems with like between the eyes target locking you, ghostly strikes target locking you, and then the BFA version has issues with stuff like roll the bones spamming over and over and over. So it comes down to preference, but I just prefer the Shadowlands version right now, the way it plays.
In comparison from BFA to Shadowlands, I can definitely see that for sure. And we're going to get to the issues and maybe possible fixes for sure. But now let's see what Mystler has to say about the best iteration of Outlaw for him.
I think I'm also inclined to go with the current one. First time I played Outlaw in like a raid context and in something that was not just casual like leveling and stuff was in Mists, I believe. And I know I've played a lot of it in Warlords of Draenor, where I was then I was more of a multi-specker than I am now. So I did play a lot of combat rogue for all the kind of AoE bosses. I distinctly remember like Operator Thogar, the train boss, where I played a lot of combat. And I think it was always fun when I played it. That was back in combat, and that was also after the rework to the Outlaw spec, which I liked a lot personally, because I'm a big fan of all these design flavors. I like the sub rework a lot, and I also like the kind of pirate rework. And yeah, back in Legion, I also think I found it already pretty cool, but Roll the Bones was a bigger issue that has been brought more in line by now. It's still kind of a point that needs, I believe, more work, but in the current version, I think Outlaw is pretty fun, and it also is doing pretty well in the current content. So I think I have to go with this current one for the coolest one.
Man, no love for the red buff, man. Jesus Christ.
Hey, in 905, you played Guile's Charm if you wanted to be like super optimal, and hey, you got lots of red buffs then. But
you can still go for that. I know Bandit's Guile is a mechanic also from back in the day that people either loved or completely hated. I never was feeling either way on it. I think it was fine when it was there, but I also don't mind if it's not there.
Well, for sure, we're going to get a little bit into the history of combat slash Outlaw, but let's see what Red Rogue has to say about his favorite iteration.
I'm going to cheat and use 2 expansions because they are technically 2 different specs at this point.
Go for it.
I see you shaking your head. Okay, I will say I do have to agree with both Guy and Mystler. I think that the Shadowlands version of Outlaw is far more fluid. It makes a lot more sense and isn't as spammy in terms of just people feeling the need to re-roll 3-4 times in a row and not using hardly any finishers. That really honestly was just crap. Yeah. I never cared for that either. I mean, I guess you could say you had the deterministic choice of doing it, but if your choice is to do less damage or more damage, it's not a choice. So
yeah, true.
I would say definitely the Shadowlands version. I like the new version of Blade Flurry being affected by Restless Blades. The fact you can basically have it up like nearly 100% of the time, especially in Mythic Plus, especially with big trash pulls and Mark for Death resets. You can have Blade Flurry rolling like 99% of the time when you're not moving between trash pulls, which is nice. Between the Eyes is, the whole target locking thing between that and Ghostly Strike, which I usually only run on Tyrannical weeks. I'll run it, or obviously in Raid for single target. For combat, though, I would say Mists of Pandaria was probably my favorite, if only because of a lot of the talents we had that I liked, like Burst of Speed, which was probably the most amazing talent ever, and they had to get rid of it after like one expansion.
It was so PvP though.
Yeah, I just literally, if you're the flag carrier, no roots, no nothing, just keep going. It takes care of everything, so that was nice. I was also a person who liked the Bandit's Guile, the red buff, green, yellow, deep, shallow, moderate insights. Nowadays, I could see that being more of an issue because back then all we had was Raid, and that was it, where you're just sitting on a boss. So keeping Bandit's Guile uptime was easier than it is nowadays with other forms of content. But I would say between the two, those are probably the 2 iterations of combat / Outlaw I liked the most.
Beautiful.
I like you bringing up Burst of Speed there. That was indeed a great talent, especially for running like all the everyday content or old raids and stuff where you just constantly run from A to B and you can't mount.
It was just
need that talent so bad.
It was,
I know.
And it was broken in arenas.
And PvP
really
was insane.
Yeah.
Is it flag
it was
carrier?
broken.
You'll never.
It was broken, but it was sick.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun. It was fun. And,
exactly. Like Shimmer's broken, but look,
dare.
Shimmer's still in the game. Just bring back Burst of Speed. I don't know. Who cares?
This. I mean, we're definitely going to get into lost things about the spec for sure. I just remember specifically Combat Rogue in WoD. when you could have kidneyed somebody for 10 seconds straight. And that was like one beautiful thing to happen. Of course, it was broken and it got nerfed eventually. But, because everybody was talking about the old days of stun locking. And they fucking brought it back to Combat Rogue. It was a beautiful thing to see. But yeah, I think you guys make great points. Definitely feels the most fluid, I would say, because I played it on and off from all of the rogue specs. I'm more of a subtlety main myself, but I did dabble into Outlaw a lot. And I found it like super fun. And I found it to be very hard to master. A lot of people meme Outlaw Rogue because it's a piano class and you just press whatever is available. And in some cases that may be true. But I'm curious on what you guys' take is on this, because it took me a while to understand everything and make sure everything has to be tracked and delivered, let's say, intelligently, not just, oh, it's available, press it, oh, it's available, press it, oh, it's available, because that's the general vibe you get when you first get into it. So what's your take on this? Is it like this really, or does it actually take a lot more to get into it and at least have good performance for it? And we can talk single target and multi-target here. Anybody can go in.
Mystler, go first.
On the spot, baby.
Regarding that, I think it's always an interesting topic because we know that subtlety is also often considered a very intimidating spec. And I often see discussions where people like to compare what is the hardest spec and stuff.
Yes.
And I think it's very two different play styles. Like both can have a fairly steep learning curve, but the curve has a different style. Sub is more intimidating because of this short cooldown cycle thing that they have for Shadowlands and stuff, whereas Outlaw is more intimidating in the pacing, I believe, and the cooldown reduction stuff, which all works very differently. And then there's, of course, Roll the Bones, which is always also a little bit intimidating for people that don't know how that works yet. But I think Outlaw can be very intimidating because it's a very fast-paced spec, and you can never fully predict how your cooldowns will work out, because everything is referenced with cooldown reduction from Restless Blades. You're very spammy, especially when you have like Adrenaline Rush and stuff up. You're very spammy. It plays more reactively, whereas Subtlety is more intimidating because it's more like about planning in a way.
Prepping,
So I think both aspects can be perceived as somewhat intimidating and difficult, but in different ways.
Plus, I feel, I'm going to add to that, after playing a lot of Assassination and Sub, when I went into Outlaw, every time I felt, Jesus, this spec has so many buttons. Because I feel like numerically, it has the most amount of buttons to be pressed, not just they look cool on the bar. They need to be pressed.
It has a lot of rotational buttons.
Yeah, that's the thing. Okay, go ahead, guys. So what's your take on this?
I think comparing like kind of like what Mystler said, I think like comparing difficulty just comes down to like, what you're struggling with as like a player. Some people find, subs cooldown lineups hard. Some people find like Outlaws super spammy, 70 APM for a 6, 7, 8 minute fight. Very annoying and difficult. And then, some people play Assassination and struggle to fall asleep, mid-pull. I don't think it's too hard. I think it has like a lot of moving parts. I think Restless Blades and can complicate things. I think reacting to procs very fast can like be pretty difficult. A lot of people say it's easy, you just like smash the buttons on cooldown, but like when you go talents like Ghostly Strikes, it changes like energy rules for pistol shots. Just managing cooldowns, watching your roll the bones buffs. It's just like eventually you just kind of get it. But it's I'd probably say it's like the second hardest, but to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's still amazingly fun, and we can there is an argument to be made in this part of okay, there is a lot of spamminess to it, but that is part of the fun of Outlaw. And yeah, I think Mystler also nailed it. It's different optics of the spec. Sub has its flavor, Assassination has its flavor, but Outlaw I think is like the most, I would say, wild out of them all, because it's just like everywhere.
It's definitely very different. It's barely a rogue spec, honestly. It feels like generally when people are like, oh, like I'm looking for like another main that like isn't Outlaw rogue, like just try Fury. It's like the same spec. You just kind of like smash buttons, 90 APM, go crazy. It's fun. I love it. Like. The spec doesn't need to be crazy hard to be super enjoyable. Like like I consider myself pretty good at Outlaw, so it's like pretty easy to me. But it's a very fun spec to play. Buttons light up, do big damage. 50% uptime of your major cooldown.
For sure.
Fun.
Something I definitely add for Outlaw is, since we've been talking about how intimidating it can also be very, very convenient, because the rotation doesn't change too much between single target and AoE.
Very
You kind of learn one thing, plus Blade Flurry, and then you can play it everywhere, which can be very, very convenient if you pick up Rogue Spec and you're new to the class. And that's great because it makes it easier to switch between content like Raids or content like Mythic Plus. You're very versatile in that regard, and that's cool and makes it, I think, more convenient to play. And there's also one big cool thing that I definitely think we have to mention in this podcast somewhere, which is Acrobatic Strikes, which is like the best thing about Outlaw.
Oh yeah,
the increased melee range and split flurry range.
Dude, I've been playing sub and raid. Oh my god, I hate melee raid. This sucks. I'm like spamming my buttons. Why is my Shadow Strike not going? I'm like, 2 yards out. Like,
yeah, I get that. I have the same thing coming from Outlook, and I'm playing sub in the raid. Okay, but what about you, Red Rogue? What do you think about this whole craziness of Outlaw?
Honestly, I've never really found Outlaw to be challenging. I mean, fast, like Guy commented on it, the 70 plus APM with celerity. Yes, that I get a lot of people who mention that, and they're like, it's just so fast, and I can't keep up with it. I'm like, I guess. I mean, you're usually only hitting like 2 buttons and then a finisher kind of deal. I mean, the 2 finishers you're hitting are going to change, like, oh yeah, broadsides up, or if with ghostly strike, sure, or serrated bone spike, yes. But I mean, you're talking like, okay, you're 2 sinister strikes. If you have broadsides up, maybe you get a proc. Okay, you're full on combo points. I think probably the biggest thing that confuses people is the combo point thing, because of broadsides and because of procs, and with quick draw or any talents you're running that can make it where you have to finish under your cap of combo points. And people are like, well, should I always finish on full combo points, or 1 below or 2 below if I have this or that? And I'm like, that's probably one of the, I would say if someone was new to the spec and they thought, oh, I should always finish on full combo points, and that's like one of the biggest losses you can get is when you're wasting combo points. Yeah. So that, and again, Mythic Plus wise, probably one of the more challenging things, I guess, if you're talking about becoming like optimal with Outlaw, if you're Necrolord, for example, knowing how to use Serrated Bone Spike effectively, knowing how to use Mark for Death on low health targets and sniping for easy combo points. That's probably where you get into like the really min-maxy territory of Outlaw, where you're not just throwing this on the first thing you hit. Oh, Mark for Death on the Forsworn Goliath that has 500,000 health, when there's a Forsworn Warder that has 80k health and it's going to die in like 2 seconds just by incidental cleave.
I'm amazed you know the name of both of those mobs. The big dude and then the small dude. The little guy. I don't know a single mob's name.
Isn't it the kick guy and
the kick guy?
Other guy?
Maybe the CC guy.
Rebellious Fist, and then the guy who does Imbue Weapon or Empower Weapon. There's like 3 dudes that are basically the same ad, but they have a different name for the ability, and it does slightly different things, but it's all the same. But
beautiful,
that's where you get into like the really min-maxy territory when it comes to Outlaw and keys, and why it can do really well, and why you'll see like the difference between a good Outlaw rogue in dungeons versus like a great one. Yeah. That's probably one of the biggest things, is just knowing how to use some of our best talents to the best of their ability. But even not optimally using Mark for Death, it still is a great talent, of course. But I guess that's a different topic.
For sure.
So talking about how Outlaw is today, because I did start to play Rogue kind of for the first time in BFA, and I went through all of the 3 specs, and I was always coming from the old school mentality, like, oh, sub is the difficult one, sub is like, but I don't know, I'm looking myself in the mirror, like, man, I don't look like a sub player. When I went through all of them, and definitely sub felt the hardest to get into, and Outlaw felt comfortable, because Outlaw felt like it had similar mechanics to other specs that I played in BFA. And now, because I took a little break, and since beta I didn't play Rogue at all, I was surprised when Marcelian told me that, oh, Outlaw is the new shit. It has like so much stuff. So I'm actually curious, aside from the fact that you're using Mark for Death, which I don't think it was used almost at all in BFA, if I recall, maybe a little bit.
I think it was the deeper strategy in BFA, at least for a couple of seasons.
Maybe I've missed it, but when I picked it up, pretty much nobody was using that except for PvP. But that aside, like, what exactly changed so much in Outlaw coming from BFA? If somebody, let's say, hasn't picked up Rogue yet or hasn't played it in a while, and why is it like
slice and dice, fool? Such
a big beast right now, because I'm a super nerd getting into things like has so many things to do, which is why I like to play survival at the moment. But can you guys talk a little bit about this and maybe cross or draw parallels to the meta and why Outlaw is still consistently one of the best PvE rogue specs?
Outlaw does, it's a very weird spec because it has no cooldowns, which is a blessing and a curse. So for example, on like fights like Painsmith, or not Painsmith, Soul Render, having no cooldown is terrible because every class in the game is going to proc Weapons of Order, Wild Spirits, Shifting Power. You know, like they're going to blow every cooldown every time ad spawn, and Outlaw will do, you know, barely any damage to anything. But at the same time, never having a cooldown gives you a lot of advantages. You're always going to do basically the same damage to the attendants in the New Mythic Plus affix. You're always going to do good boss damage. You're always just going to do the same damage every single pull, which is advantageous compared to Windwalker. You know, one pull it's going to do 50k, another pull it's going to do 5k, another pull it's going to do 5k, then it'll do 50k again. In Raid, I don't think it's that good in Raid this tier, just because I think Sub and Assassination are a little bit overtuned, but in Mythic Plus, it has stuff like Gouge, it has a short cooldown Vanish, which is useful for avoiding some mechanics. Acrobatic Strikes exist. Its damage patterns are just like a lot better than the other rogue specs.
Also, I would like to add to that one of the most beautiful things that can happen in Mythic Plus, and I know everybody's gonna hate me for this, but Vanish, Killing Spree with Mark of the Assassin Legendary. I said it, okay?
Well, that's still
it's still
does
fun.
A lot of damage.
I know, and it's fun. It's my preferred playstyle of chase, okay? Hate me.
It's fun. I love it. I ever since like launch, I was like Master Assassin is like good. There's like no way that this legendary that was best in slot in all of Legion is like bad in keys. There's no way. And then like if the people like click together, like the Master Assassin, Vanish, Killing Spree, it's like, oh wait, we can just like combo this and do 1 million damage.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, I loved Killing Spree. I just love the fantasy of it. You know, just choom, 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 choom. Okay, you gotta be careful. You know, I died a couple of times.
I remember.
Yeah, I just, you know,
I'm glad I have another
you know, you have
Killing
tricks
Spree.
of the trade as well, right?
not because of that, man, because it teleported me into a frontal, like one of the hits.
Oh, right.
Yeah, every time you Killing Spree, you blow every defensive every time.
Yeah. Well, you live and learn for sure, but that's definitely it. And like to add to Flame's question, I think like the biggest changes that did come from BFA towards Shadowlands was the actual changes to roll the bones. Maybe you guys can elaborate because I know they also brought back Dreadblades, and that was a disappointment, maybe, because I love Dreadblades in Legion, man, but what happened? No competition. It's on maybe I'm mistaken. It's on the same roll with Alacrity.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Well, technically, sorry for like taking up too much time for anybody else. The issue with Dreadblades isn't so much Alacrity. The problem with Dreadblades is Dreadblades. Like, for some reason, the talents in this row just always suck. The Assassination talents in that row are terrible. The Outlaw talents in this row are terrible. Like, Loaded Dice and Dreadblades are just, like, trash. They just need, like, minor buffs and they'd be good enough. Like, Subtlety doesn't use Alacrity, obviously, for, like, you know, Enveloping Shadow is a very, very, very good talent, but it's very easy to make talents that are like better than Alacrity, but you know, they just don't. Like Dreadblades needs like very, very little to be better. At least if you're Venthyr. I know if you're a Venthyr Outlaw Rogue, Dreadblades is like 20 DPS higher or something, but it's like it's a hard sell when it does like 0 AoE damage.
I'm guessing that's if you're running Obedience, right?
Oh no, it's with no Obedience. Wow. Obedience desyncs the cooldown, so it makes it bad.
Interesting.
Yep. Sounds like a fun niche build.
It is. It's the only way to add single target burst to Outlaw. Like actual, like if you look at like the damage curve, it's actually like it's like a sub-road. It's like actually pretty decent, but
But
I think the other problem with Dreadblades is just the way combo points currently work in general for this spec.
Yeah.
There's a lot of combo point income that it has, so that the kind of fill your combo point by instantly doesn't make too much of a difference if just pressing one builder almost does the same. So that's kind of, yeah, they brought it back because it was a cool thing back in Legion, but it doesn't really fit that well right now.
It just needs like a simple like finisher damage added to it, or like add it to Restless Blades and it'd be a competitive talent, but it's just missing like one thing to make it good enough, which kind of sucks because it is a super fun talent.
Yeah, I remember I'd mentioned this forever ago when they brought it back into the game. because with the artifact weapon in Legion, you had Dreadblade's Vigor, which was just when Dreadblades was active, you got a 10% damage buff. That's it. I'm like, that would probably be enough to make it at least a viable choice, maybe. But the problem with Dreadblades, especially in any sort of serious content, anything that makes you take damage to deal damage is probably not a good idea anyhow. At 5% of your maximum health every finisher, I think, and you're using probably like 5-6 finishers, I think you can fit in one Dreadblades, maybe 4 or 5, I can't remember. But
It's
You're talking.
So sorry, it's current HP and it's reduced by versatility as well.
Oh.
It's still like a suicide talent.
Yeah,
It's still like taking
it's still a hard
damage to
sell.
deal damage just doesn't sound like a good idea
Yeah.
regardless.
It needs to do like a
Actually-
lot of damage to compensate.
Exactly, especially if it's not like competitive at all currently. What's the point of taking something that damages yourself?
Yeah,
Right.
20 damage on Venthyr is not worth it.
It's definitely a hard sell, and I think they missed the opportunity there because, yeah, of course, I think bringing back Dreadblades was, I think, maybe an answer to some of the community asking for it back, but they had the opportunity to, you know, maybe change it a little bit, you know. And this is my second point here. If you were to like actually bring a change to Dreadblades or maybe loaded dice as well, what would you do to like not completely overshadow Alacrity, but, you know, have it some way work? Or if it's not maybe possible to balance this talent row, at least separate it. Okay, you take this for Mythic Plus, you take this for funnel damage, single target, whatever, and you take this for, I don't know, Thorghast or World Content or I don't know, whatever the fuck. What would you guys do to these talents to make them work? Freestyle.
Honestly, loaded dice should just be baseline. Like, period, end. Loaded dice should be baseline. Like,
I
you don't,
agree.
I mean, we hit Adrenaline Rush like every minute, yes, I guess. But getting 2 guaranteed buffs when we already have Sleight of Hand, which increases our 2 buff chance anyways, it's
Yeah.
not like that impressive of a talent in the first place at all. Dreadblades, like as I mentioned, the Dreadblades Vigor thing, or maybe if it brought back like the Greed mechanic, which was whenever, I don't know if it was only when Dreadblades was active, but whenever you used a finishing move, you would do like an AoE burst of damage and you deal damage and I think heal from the damage dealt. It's like a small amount. It was one of the artifact traits on the
Yep.
Legion artifact for Outlaw. That'd probably be like the 2 big things, because the fact that a haste buff is the best choice, and it's, I don't know, it's just a very unimpressive talent that's boring.
It's boring, yeah. It's flat.
It shouldn't be the best choice by being boring. I don't know.
Yeah, very true. What do you guys? Would you change anything else on it?
So in my opinion, like I'm not sure about like, you know, specific numbers. You can tweak that later.
Let Ian
more
worry
interested
about
in
it.
like cool ideas. I think loaded dice should just always give you 2 buffs. I don't think it would be that overpowered. It's like a terrible talent in its current state. Like it needs something like crazy and good. I think that sounds fun. It would remove complaints about like, oh, Outlaw's so consistent, blah blah blah. Just go loaded dice, pretend it's super consistent now. It'll probably be better. I think that's like more interesting than just like a 20% haste buff that like. It, like honestly, I hate Alacrity the more and more I raid, because fights like Denathrius exist, fights like Sylvanas exist, where it just drops and then I have to rebuild it. I'm doing no damage in between. Yeah, I want to be done with Alacrity. I hate this talent.
It's been the go-to for so long for both Outlaw and Assassination, and it's shit for sub. It's like basically non-existent there, because
It's probably a problem where the entire row just comes together because it doesn't really match. Like, I think the best way to fix that is not like just addressing loaded dice on its own, but the entire row has to be like rethought. It needs more of a purpose. What is this row supposed to be?
Well, one thing so there's the new PvP talent, Enduring Brawler, where every second you're in combat, you gain 1% stamina and then 1% chance for Sinister Strike procs. I think like remove the stamina and just make that Alacrity. I feel like that's a more interesting way to make like a stay in combat focused talent, because that's what Alacrity is. It's like, hey, you stay in combat, you gain like haste, you gain damage.
Yeah.
I think like something like Enduring Brawler, where it's just like you stay in combat, you get rewarded, I think is you can make talents like that are more interesting than just like here's haste. Just something that makes you play a little bit different, something you can feel, something that like does anything that isn't just like passive energy, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Staying on the topic of talents, okay, I was expecting for us to really stay a lot on, you know, the Alacrity and Dreadblades and loaded dice thing for sure, but I'm pretty sure you guys know that maybe other talents on Outlaw can possibly receive some love in the future. I don't know if you ever thought of this or talked about this previously. Maybe in the first row, maybe, I don't know. I'm not saying
Weapon
anything.
Master's never used.
Yeah.
I would just say good
I
talents.
I think Outlaw's talents are honestly quite incredible. I think it's like one of the only specs in the game where people are willing to be like, it's only 2% DPS, I don't care. A lot of people still don't use Ghostly Strikes when it's better on single target because it's barely better. People still don't use Mark for Death because it's barely better. People don't use Killing Spree because it's barely better. I think like a lot of Outlaw's talents are like very close and very interesting, and there's a lot of reason to use either. Like Deeper Stratagem's easier, Quick Draw is more AoE, Killing Spree is like, it does more damage, but you die sometimes. I think like only a few talents for Outlaw are terrible. I think Weapon Master sucks. I think Loaded Dice Dreadblade suck, and I think Dancing Seal sucks. Dancing Seal should just give Wits from BFA, which is just Sinister Strike proc chance during Blade Flurry. Just makes the spec flow look better. Makes the talent actually good for AoE rather than just terrible. And then Weapon Master just sucks. And then we've already been over the Alacrity Row a bunch.
Yeah.
So.
Would it be like, I don't know, if there were to be a replacement, and we're not going into that part of the video, but I would. What podcast did we talk about the multi-strike thing in WoD?
Yeah, must have been Frost DK maybe.
I think so. Do you guys remember? I don't know who played. A guy probably you don't know, but do you guys remember the multi-strike? I think was a stat.
Was WoD the last time that we had it?
I think it
yes,
was.
We only had it for one expansion. I think.
It was in WoD.
Wasn't it only just for WoD?
Yeah, I think it was in WoD. Because
so.
Weapon Master kind of reminds me a bit about on that thing, and I'm not sure if it works for Outlaw in the sense that the second strikes give you combo points. But if it does work like that, it would be like a shit show of, because as Mystler mentioned earlier, you do get a lot of freaking combo points for Outlaw. So maybe, I don't know, a talent that could possibly empower some 1/3, not the first, not the second, but your third finisher all the time, or something that could interact better with the actual consuming of combo points rather than actually adding to the pool of it. What do you guys would think about that in the first talent row? Because, okay, Ghostly Strike is pure single target. Okay, the quick draw, you take it in dungeons mostly. I take it in single target too, because I don't know about that Ghostly Strike. It's fine, but
It's only 2%. Who cares? I agree.
Exactly. But
this is what I love about Outlaw talents is like it's like people are like, just like quick draw, I don't care, and then people still get like rank 1 parses with quick draw. I think that's super interesting.
That's the thing. Cause I tried the pure optimal build for single target, and for me, it's oh my god. It's like, oh my god, there's so much here, man. Yeah. Come on.
The optimal, 2 extra buttons is a lot when the spec already has like 10.
Yeah, that's
Never
what I'm
forget fun translates into DPS as well.
That's true. But that's what I'm saying. So on that row, you have Ghostly Strike, which maybe it's not really that popular, and the difference being 2%, okay, fine, min max if you want. Then Quick Draw, really valuable in dungeons. Then Weapon Master, could that be replaced with something that would address this risk of maybe people sometimes overcapping a lot on their combo points? A talent that will actually incentivize players to use or to be aware of some sort of like finisher that would be really empowered after its third hit or something like that. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if my English delivers what I'm trying to say here.
I think I understand. I think the issue is like, so like what you're trying to say is like every third finisher would do like bonus damage or like
something like that to incentivize
yeah.
people spending more.
Yeah. I think the issue with that is that because like Outlaw has 2 finishers, is Between the Eyes and then it has Dispatch. Just the way that Outlaw kind of works is you just kind of press them on cooldown. I don't think there's enough interesting interactions within the spec to do something like that. Where like for something like Subtlety, there's stuff like Enveloping Shadow, which changes like compared to like Dark. Like kind of how you do your SOD windows, but I don't think like a spec like Outlaw is like I think it's too spammy to have like some like interesting lineup mechanic. Similar to Echoing Reprimand, a lot of people will like ask me, it's like, hey, do you know if it's a good idea to like hold Between the Eyes for the 7 combo points? I'm like, no, it's just not, because the more you hold it, the more it's not on cooldown, the less it's on the target, and then the more you're wasting with Restless Blades. I don't really know any interesting ways to make Weapon Master good. I think it's crazy that if you went Guile's Charm, which is the Sinister Strike legendary, if you went Triple Threat, which is the Sinister Strike potency, Weapon Master was still bad. I think the talent should just like maybe buff Sinister Strike damage. I don't really know. I think it's just like I don't really know. It just needs something.
A thought that just ran through my... Oh, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there.
No, go ahead. I was done.
A thought that just ran through my head. It's not necessarily about fixing weapon mass or anything or buffing it, but you brought up the idea with finishers being empowered, which is kind of in my mind always the sub thing. Sub is the spec that is like mastery, strong finishers and stuff.
I'm coming from a sub mentality. I'm sorry.
What ran through my mind was back in the day we had anticipation, and I feel like that would be something that would fit Outlaw very well to make this more like a forgiving spec, where you don't have to plan around your combo points so much. You could have just that anticipation buffer for overflowing combo points that you can carry over for the next round, and then you could always go for like maximum combo points and kind of eliminate that part of the thinking process.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
I feel like that would just be like pretty good overall as well, just because, you know, there's like a little bit of overcapping in Outlaw, and then you could like kind of stop worrying about all the overcapping nonsense, and then you could just specifically focus on like always max combo points, which would be advantageous for Restless Blades, for, you know, damage, for deeper stratagem. Like I feel like something like Anticipation would be a cool idea.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. All right, but I was thinking about moving from 9.0 to 9.1. I don't think Outlaw got touched too much, did it? Did they do it? It was basically
change, but that was across the board for everyone.
Yeah, so it was more or less remained the same. Now, I'm gonna sound like such a sub-rogue bias boy here, but sorry. So I've looked a little bit at the latest Mythic Plus logs, and I know it's not the most trustworthy source, okay? But for the people who have played in Mythic Plus, and I saw some interesting situation there. One that I did not expect, although we did kind of talked about in the Sub-Rogue podcast with Mystler and Fu. Apparently, at this point, Subtlety has taken Outlaw in the logs.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Is this? I know you guys, you know, obviously main Outlaw and stuff, but in Mythic Plus, did you see this happening? Do you see this? First of all, do you see this remaining like this? Because it would be really interesting for me to see, I don't know, NDI or a Sub-Rogue. That would be interesting. What are your thoughts on this? It's early, I know, it's logs, not credible, but it is a question mark.
I guess the biggest thing is the reason with a lot of the buffs that Subtlety got to not only AoE, but with single target with the shadow techniques. I forget exactly how much they reduced. I think they just shaved off one auto attack for shadow techniques requirement, which gives more combo points, more energy and all that.
That's big buff.
Yeah, that's big. It doesn't sound big. Like one less auto attack, you're like, it's only one, but we auto attack a lot. I mean, you're talking 2 weapons and with Subtlety dual daggers and a slice and dice, you're talking a really fast attack speed. So while it always sounds like, oh, one less hit, that's really good. But what I was gonna get at is Subtlety's always done really good with burst damage and priority target damage. And with the new attendants being kind of like how it was with Prideful, just without the damage they had. Like if they had the damage they had now during Prideful, you'd probably see something similar. But in any pull where you have a big bad enemy or something that needs to get down to a lower health, either due to bolstering, they need to even out health between like the Goliath example again for Spires of Ascension, and you have one target that has double the health of the others. I mean, you have a class that can funnel all of their Shuriken Storm combo point generation into Eviscerates, or they can just use it all for just straight AoE constantly with Black Powder now. So you have a spec that can do 2 different profiles of damage really well, whereas, as we mentioned with Outlaw has single target and then single target with Blade Flurry on, and that's it. It doesn't, I mean, you have your between the eyes target, but you're going to do that in single target anyways. And in Mythic Plus, if you're Necrolord, you have Bone Spike spam. That's about it, because you can get more resets due to targets dying and the reset mechanic of it. But I think that that's probably the biggest reason you're going to see a pretty even split, because they both do really well what they do and have great defensives. It's just what your group's composition needs. Like if you don't have the Arcane Mage that does a 150k crit on the Goliath or something like that to get things evened out. I think it really depends on group composition more than anything.
For sure. and the logs, actually, if you look at the... sorry, guys, just going to make this parenthesis.
You're going first.
The logs, if you look at the number of logs, it's like way more Outlaw rogue logs. So people are still playing a lot more Outlaw in keys than they play sub. But the ones that do play sub actually perform quite good. I'm surprisingly good. I know the buffs were there. I just wouldn't expect it to be this good. Go ahead, guys. Sorry.
No, don't worry about it. What's it called? Sub is a weird spec in keys. It's probably one of the weirdest specs in the game for keys. It does like just a lot of weird things. It doesn't do cleave. It only does. It can funnel and then it can do AOE. It can't do either. Like Outlaw will do very good. Like it'll focus on the target. It'll do a lot of damage. It'll do good damage to everything else. Sub is only able to kill 1 target or kill 8 targets. Which is like kind of like it's weird.
It is true.
It's very good at killing attendants. It's very good at killing bosses. It's unplayable in some dungeons. Is honestly like the biggest hurdle for subtlety. Outlaw will do basically like the same in every dungeon because if you're pulling 1 or you're pulling 8 or you're pulling 500, doesn't really matter. You're probably gonna do the exact same damage. But subtlety, like Theater of Pain, is a terrible subtlety dungeon.
Oh no, that's the worst.
Every pull is like 1 to 3 targets, so the spec doesn't do damage.
Yeah. It's shit. I hate it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if people are willing to. I don't think people are able to swap spec to spec based on dungeon, based on the fact that Outlaw wants Kyrian or Necrolord, and then Subtlety wants Venthyr. So I think just based on the fact that Outlaw is more universal and the Covenant choice is universal, I feel like Outlaw is just gonna stick around more. But maybe for some like MDI or Great Push stuff, like Sub does a lot of 8 target damage. Like if you're just pulling all of the mobs at once, Subtlety does way more damage than Outlaw, just because Storm Black Powder on cooldown is very good.
Yeah.
But I don't expect Sub. I don't expect the Sub hype to last as keys get higher and it's harder to pull 8 targets constantly. I could see it being good, but I'm still skeptical because of it has a very large weakness.
Yeah, for
I think the buffs that Sub received in 9.1 definitely made it more competitive right now. So I think Zera is pretty right there that preference and group style plays a lot into it. And I think everyone who wants to play either spec, if you prefer Outlaw, if you prefer Sub, you will be perfectly fine in any Mythic Plus. But they are playing very differently. And I think Outlaw is the more straightforward one, as you described. It's easier with rotation and Blade Flurry to be good at pretty much everything, whereas Sub always has these decisions to make, like, do I want to only do priority damage or do I want to only do AoE, because both is impossible. It's unless I kind of alternate, what is the point? So it's a spec that will do well for people that love to play it and that know how to use it well, but it's not like the most popular and common one if you just want to do your weekly keys or whatever.
It is very viable, is what I'll say, but I don't think it's better.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to pitch in as well with this specific topic, is because the consensus was, especially coming from BFA, sure, damage actually is important, and when the damage is bigger by, I don't know, 10-20%, then yeah, that's probably going to determine who's going to get into the group. But statistically, Outlaw had arguably the better toolkit that went well with Mythic Plus, so that's what I'm surprised as well. Like if the damage is not that big, if the difference between the damages is not that big between Sub and Outlaw, isn't Outlaw still a better, arguably, spec for Mythic Plus just because of its utility toolkit, which is, from what I understand, going into MDI and the really high keys, is you kind of really want some utility, aka Boomkin trees. Even though Fire Mage probably did way more than Boomkins, you still want that one specific utility, which is what was.
I mean, of course, man. You have. I mean, Rogue, as a general, is a very useful class in dungeons. But Outlaw specifically, I think Guy pretty much hit the nail on the coffin there. I mean, it can do damage-wise. It can perform in any situation. Doesn't matter. Sub, on the other hand, has great shine when there's lots of targets, or great shine when there's one target. You cannot really cleave for Sub is shit. It's non-existent and it's bad. And you can try to make it work, but it's so mind fucking. I mean,
you're like pulling 3 targets and then you're like storm, like rupture. Then you're like, oh, I have to do this again. And it's just yeah.
I know. I play. I play it. I know. But in terms of utility, you can make an argument for the utility of Sub within Shadowlands. Sometimes, like when you're in a cliff situation, for example, and you're not really going to perform that well, your Shadowlands can be useful because you can like triple, quadruple stun everybody and help the tank. That could be a thing. while Outlaw has its gouge, obviously. And I think like the basic thing for Outlaw is like, you know, having access to all of its abilities much faster than I think any spec in the game, just by playing the spec.
I feel like Outlaw is more versatile than in accordance with the content.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's as the boy said, you know, you don't change too much on the rotation thing. You know, it's either Blade 30 or not over there. And, you know, depending on what legendary you use and stuff like that. I think that's one cool thing about Outlaw, because you could opt in to go with Celerity, if it's still a thing. I haven't made the research if Celerity is still the thing for Outlaw, okay. Or you can go with Mark of the Assassin, what the fuck was it called? The Vanish and Killing Spree. You know, it's a matter of choice. This is something that, unfortunately, I didn't really find now, at least for sub, because Obedience is so good in single target. You just really want to go with that because it's super good. And in dungeons, finality is basically you cannot make too much use of Mark of the Assassin. You could, but it's not. It doesn't bring the fun element as Killing Spree. That's the thing, right? So,
I think all of the rogue specs have their own like little like fraction of like cool utility. Like sub has like the cheap shot spam, which you can do, which is like, you know, bad for damage, but you know, some situations who cares about damage, just like not dying. It has like night terrors, which is like it's able to have like a kind of like a bad mind numbing poison, or it's able to have mind numbing poison and then a bad crippling poison. Outlaw has gouge and short vanishes, and then Assassination has iron wire. Obviously probably Gouge is like the best at the moment, but like all of the rogue specs have like been meta in Mythic Plus, and all of their utility has like been considered like some of the best. I remember in season 1 of BFA, people in the Outlaw Rogue Discord used to complain that Assassination has too much utility in keys because Iron Wire is too good. So like as the meta kind of shifts, people kind of change their opinion on what's like, oh, this is so overpowered, this needs to get nerfed. I think Outlaw just has like kind of like the best damage profile. Gouge is like super useful. But if like Assassination was, or like Subtlety were just to be like better in AoE damage, people would find, you know, their own use of utility. I remember at the launch of Shadowlands as well, people were playing a lot of Subtlety. And a lot of people told me that like Outlaw is dead because, you know, Subtlety can, you know, spam cheap shot a pack. I'm like, maybe, I don't know. Seems like Gouge managed to, you know, still remain pretty good. So
it's the utility meta.
The utility meta, yeah.
I mean, most of the utility toolkit overlaps anyway because it is class wide. So there's most of the stuff just overlaps and you have it everywhere. There's these niches, like you said, with the shot in the dark stunning or iron wire for assassination that makes differences and gives everyone a little bit of an edge in some situation. But overall, it's very overlapping. I'd argue with Assassination maybe has the worst toolkit because
100%,
they can't use Shift for dispels because it's part of the DPS rotation,
I hate
which
that.
feels.
On
the other hand,
Assassination is down bad.
On the other hand, I don't think Shift is too impressive anyway because of the long cooldown. And as soon as you have anybody else who can soothe, what's the point of pressing it?
Yeah, I mean, it's in terms of like playing a rogue spec and actually in specific multi-pack situations, I feel like the Assassination was the most stressful for me. Because you have to like silence everybody, then put up all over the dots and shit and maintain them and all of that. I felt it was like the most stressful. Really,
it's probably the hardest AoE.
It is for me as well. Really, I would say get me a coffee in single target type damage, but but in AoE it's a
38 PM deeper stratagem. Just
chill with the breeze. But okay, let's move a little bit into the more creative space here, because we touched a little bit on this, but here's the scenario. I think Mystler is already used to it by now, but here it comes. So Ian has a Costas. We all know who Ian has a Costas is right now, right?
Yeah.
Famous resto shaman, right?
Oh, I thought it was the chef at the restaurant we usually go to.
Yeah,
that's
really,
a different Ian.
Yeah, but it's gated food. So Ian has a Costas, comes up to you. It's like, okay, I'm gonna give you this big sack of money, right? I'm gonna hire you in the rogue design team, and you're gonna be in charge of the outlaw spec. All right. So your task now is to either create an ability that would be super cool for outlaw, or bring back something from the past. And if you would do that, what would it be? I will edit this part if you guys want to think about it or make drawings or anything else.
I already got one. I've been thinking about this since like BFA launch.
Oh shit! All right. Well, let's go, baby. Let's go.
So, like, Roll the Bones is considered like a lot of variants for Outlaw, but like really, it's It's Sinister Strike. This ability sucks. I hate pressing Sinister Strike. When you press it 4 times in a row on a raid boss, nothing feels worse than just spending energy, no procs, no combat potency, no nothing. So Fire Mage has a passive called Enhanced Pyrotechnics, where like the Fire Mage is built around getting crits to, you know, do like its stuff. Kind of Outlaw kind of feels very similar in getting Sinister Strike procs to do literally anything. Wits has been, you know, it was like basically defining for the spec in BFA. Enduring Brawler, even though like the spec's a bit of a meme in PvP, is like ridiculous. It's a ridiculous talent. I feel like it needs something baseline to help with this. So like I said, Fire Mage is a passive called Enhanced Pyrotechnics, where every time it doesn't crit, it gets increased crit chance until it crits and then it resets. I feel like Outlaw needs something like that for Sinister Strike, where every time you Sinister Strike and it doesn't proc, it increases the chance to proc. Just to help a little bit, because
that's cool.
My God. Like sometimes you have like Adrenaline Rush, you have like Najib Thrill Seeker, you have Lust, and you're just pressing like 90 buttons a minute. And then sometimes you press Sinister Strike 4 times in a row and you're at 5 energy and you're sad and it sucks. So I feel like something to help with that, like that's what I hate about Outlaw, is like those kind of situations. So I feel like something to help with that would be like incredible.
Pretty cool. I'll be down with that. I'm hoping somebody listens.
Shadow Techniques, the Sinister Strike edition.
Yes.
With the buff
free
one.
combo points. That's all I want.
No, that would be cool as fuck. But yeah, I'm hoping people are listening to this and hearing. I think.
I pray.
Yeah, man. If not folks who are playing these specs and actually geeking on about them and making math around them and I'm trying to understand how everything ticks, who else? Because I'm not sure on this, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of these devs are not really taking their whole time doing what these fine folks.
I mean,
do.
this wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary. Obviously, Fire Mage has it. Havoc Demon Hunter has with the Demon Blades, where you just take out the spammer, because I think in 2021 you're kind of over just spamming your builder for like 4 or 5 globals in a row until you actually want to do stuff, because you just want to do your cool stuff. So if they can do it for Fire Mage, if they can do it for Havoc, and if I think about it, I think I might find a few others that do the same thing. They should be able to do it. It's just builders are. It's old.
I mean, dude, but I cannot see a world where a rogue spec is not a builder spender thing.
It's not about not being a builder
like,
spender. Make builders more interesting.
Yeah. All right, Mystler, do you have anything on the line here, man?
I definitely love that suggestion already. When it comes to ideas on what to do with Outlaw, I think I have to address Roll the Bones.
Careful with this answer.
This is just like concept brainstorming. Of course, nobody has to agree with it or anything, but I've always been in favor of the idea of having Roll the Bones more of a reactive thing that matters. I really like the change that they made in Shadowlands with the cooldown-based thing, where it's not about just re-rolling some buff. I would have loved for them to not just stop there and make it a cooldown, but also to rework the entire thing of what it rolls and the buffs. Personally, I think it would be more interesting to have some kind of special effects, similar to legendaries maybe, that you react to instead of having maintenance buffs. So you're not just rolling a number that is randomized of buffs that you get, but you have a set of things that can happen when you press Roll the Bones on a cooldown. Like it's hard to put that in right now because we already have these legendaries, but back in Battle for Azeroth, for example, one idea was always to factor in what Greenskins does, that you get a press Roll the Bones, you get a buff, and then your next between the eyes gives your next pistol shot a buff, and it's kind of a thing that you react to and that you factor into your gameplay. I have no idea what other kind of buffs you could bring, but something unique that happens and kind of affects your rotation where you react to and get some kind of special boost for one period of time instead of having just maintenance buffs.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of that idea, I think Between the Eyes being a buff kind of so Ruthless Precision makes Between the Eyes an actual button worth pressing, for raw damage per cast. I think it's very kind of dumb that Between the Eyes is base foundation of your rotation, and then there's also this thing that makes you want to cast it sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but in the launch of BFA, when we didn't have Azerite traits based around Between the Eyes, you would only cast Between the Eyes when you had Ruthless Precision.
Right.
But I feel like something like that would be interesting, where it's like, hey, here's this button you never press. When you get this buff, now you're pressing it. Rather than it just being like, here's your rotation. Here's like, oh, now you have broadside, you're doing 100 more damage. Here's true bearing, you do 100 more damage. Here's grand melee, you're doing like 20 more damage. Right. I don't know, something like, when this buff is active, like pistol shot does like 500% bonus damage, and then like instead of casting Sinister Strike, you're casting pistol shot as your main generator, so that you're actually reacting to like buffs you kind of get.
Between the Eyes is currently main part of the rotation, so that is not the best example. It was better in BFA, but right now you could, for example, use the tiny toxic blade effect and just make Shift deal enormous damage for once, or something like that.
True. What about you, Redbrook? Do you have anything on the table? Have you thought about something?
More so just because of flavor and because I really liked the ability. I kind of wish Cannonball Barrage still existed.
Yes. Cannonball Barrage, dude, that was so fun.
And it would give us untarget capped damage. So it'd be something. I would basically get rid of Dancing Steel and put it on the same row as Killing Spree, because both those moves are affected by Blade Flurry. So having something that isn't target capped, meaning even if it was on like, I forget what it was back then. I think it was like a minute and a half cooldown. But if it was a minute and a half cooldown affected by by Restless Blades or True Bearing or either or, then you could actually have a spec that isn't stuck at, here's 18 dudes. I can hit 5 of them with my 6-foot-long swords, even though I'm in the middle of all of them. So
also just make the talent overpowered. It's hilarious. Why it should just be the best talent. It shoots cannonballs.
Dude,
just make that talent overpowered. It's sick.
I loved that move. I was so mad when they got rid of it. That was a good one.
It was fun. It was fun.
There's some talents where I'm like, just make this overpowered because it's sick. Who cares? It's like nerf the spec afterwards. Just make like Cannonball Barrage, Dreadblade. Just make it overpowered and then like nerf the spec later. I don't know.
Alacrity is the only talent we use on that row. Anyways, you might as well make Cannonball Barrage the only talent used on that row.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree.
Carry on the trend. To be honest, I was kind of hoping somebody would say this because like the Outlaw Now How's the pirate theme is like, is anybody gonna say something about shooting cannonballs?
Yeah, man. It was
that's like
one of the most beautiful things that ever happened. Like visually, it was amazing. And I mean, Guy says to just make it overpowered, man.
Yeah.
That's the solution.
I can already see like people with pitchforks in the comments, like what?
Especially the people that all bring combat backs, like. Just take cannonballs, man. Dude. Just take cannonballs and be happy.
I mean,
that would also mean that the broadside buff should buff your Cannonball Barrage, right?
True.
Well, of course.
It only makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
It would be amazing. It would be amazing. I mean, it would still be, AOE thing, which we all know Outlaw doesn't really do good in AOE, but fuck it. It's really good thematic. Thematically, it's really good, and if it would be broken, as I suggest, the more flavor, the better, because it's a wild pirate. Always said it like Outlaws.
I remember in
pirates don't
during
fight
like
fair.
Shadowlands.
Yeah.
No, go on. Sorry about that.
I was just saying. I remember in Shadowlands pre-patch when they like were revealing all the conduits and stuff. They like revealed count the odds, and I was like, this just needs to be broken. This needs to be the best in slot conduit because it just makes the spec like way better. I'm down to have like some broken stuff that is like probably like out of line as long as it makes the spec more interesting.
Yeah, but Guy, what do you do with the other specs then? Because then the people from the other spec, you're gonna have the warriors, the paladins, the DKs come. But look at Outlaw Rogue, it has that conduit to make some broken, man.
Didn't you learn anything from 2 years of DFA?
Up everybody.
I'm down for everybody getting broken talents that are hilarious and amazing and incredible and do flashy things. I'm 100% down for that.
Oh yeah.
Like half of the new honor talents, I just want baseline. Like half of those honor talents are insane.
Right.
Like they just seem like cool as hell.
Right. Well. We have a bit of that in BFA? What was that essence that gave you a PvP talent?
Conflict and Strife.
Conflict and Strife. I think they tried a bit with that over there.
It's more like the 9.1 honor talents that I'm like super interested in because but like with the rework of all of those honor talents, they're insane. Like
a lot of
evasion on Restless Blades, enduring brawler with the stamina and the Sinister Strike procs. Like a lot of those talents are like honestly a lot better than some of the current talents for like the PvE tree, and I feel like you definitely just like throw them in there and just be like, hey, what happens? Like we'll nerf it later. And like,
for sure.
That's always my like design around balance. Like just make them cool first, right?
I don't know, man. I honestly feel at this point, maybe they don't have enough manpower. I don't know. Maybe they're just a little bit overwhelmed with the COVID situation or whatever. But it does feel that even if they want to make stuff like super overpowered or broken and stuff, I don't think they had the time to just make it like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a big ask.
Yeah.
So it feels like balancing might be the biggest issue right now. It seems like we're struggling patch by patch to get like some proper balancing as well. And you still haven't heard anything on Enhancement Shaman. So I feel like
Enhancement Shaman in every podcast.
They're just, it's sad, man. It made me sad. It was supposed to be my main.
Hey, for what it's worth, is it Limit is playing Enhancement Shaman and Race
one of them. They have like 2 or 3 Havocs.
Yeah. Is it Echo? I haven't been following it too much.
We have to ask why. Is it because all of the melees and Wind Fury?
It's because of Wind Fury
Wind
Totem.
Fury Totem, baby!
It's because of Wind Fury Totem.
Well, it's fine. It's all good. Hoping, but go ahead, guys. Then I'm gonna have one more question.
I was just gonna say, I think like for what it's worth, I think like overall right now, I feel like this tier is like pretty balanced. Like if you just look at like raid, like raid comps, obviously are always gonna be like you're always gonna stack the good class. But like if you just look at like the statistics and like the average along like all the fights, like a lot of the specs are like pretty close, at least for the time being. Where like. You gotta get away with like anything at the moment.
They've done a lot better, and even if you look at the Mythic Plus scene, even the 9.0 and 9.05 was way better than BFA. Where in BFA you couldn't have classes that could get 17s done, and now everybody's just doing over 20s. So it's actually better.
I remember at the start of Shadowlands, people were saying like, "Oh, Rogue's dead. Rogue's terrible. Doesn't do damage. Never gonna be brought to keys because like Windwalker, Marksman, Fire Balance." People are playing DK, Shadow Priest, and then like the meta kind of revolves and evolves, and some comps are playing like Shadow Priest, some comps are playing Outlaw, some are playing Windwalker, not so much Marksman anymore, but I feel like overall like the meta is like pretty balanced.
Right. But there's
barred a few things. I think overall like the balance like this patch at least is pretty decent.
The problem I often see with it, like especially when you get into like really high keys and you have the elite of the elite that are pushing 25s or whatever, is it's like a handful. There's like less than like 50 to 100 people that push these absurdly high keys that are at the level of the Great Push, the MDI, these world first guilds and world first groups. So when people look at the statistics and they're like, oh, in the 25 plus range, it's only Outlaw Rogues, Boomkins, and whatever. And it's because there's only like 5 groups doing it. And they happen to have most of them running that. So that's not saying that other specs or classes can't do it. It's just you have people that, even if it's only 1 or 2% better, if you're the person who's trying to get the first 27 in time or the first 28 in time in the world, 1 or 2%, that's why you have guilds that'll race change for mythic progression for race to world first. Like on Painsmith, you had a lot of people that I guess were re-rolling to Goblin for the jump things, so they can avoid balls and crap like that. I mean, that was the same thing with Mythic Kill Jaden back in Tuma Sargeras too. You had a lot of your slow classes. You had literally race changing just for the utility, and that's the 1% you need to be able to do it. So it's I think the overall the Mythic Plus representation is good. It's just people kind of they fixate on the elite, like the top 0.1% a little too much, and it's like a waterfall effect from there,
Meta is very, very frustrating. I just got a DM by another guy yesterday, I think, who asked me, hey, I want to play sub in keys, but nobody wants to take me. They all tell me I have to play Outlaw because it's the best rogue spec, and I feel so sorry for you, man.
I feel like people have an unhealthy obsession with like metagames in general. Where like a lot of people will like similarly ask me, it's like, hey, like I'm raiding, I'm gonna be like going for cutting edge, but nothing like super like top 100 or whatever. Like I'm gonna be like a top 500 guild or something. I'm like, can I play Outlaw? I'm like, of course you can. Every spec in the entire game is viable outside of like top 20. Same goes for keys. Like, of course, like you have like these like 5 to 10 groups pushing keys at the very, very top. A lot of them are going to be playing the same spec, both for comfort and the 1% difference. But like when you're doing like a 15, you could play 5 survival hunters and you could probably time the key. It's not like I feel like people razor focus on like a metagame that just doesn't really concern them too much.
Mm-hmm. Dude, survival hunter is killing it, man. It's killing it. He free plays.
You're the spear, baby.
He's playing survival in keys. The damage is ridiculous. It's oh my god.
Don't tell people, man.
Survival always does.
Wow.
A surprising amount of damage. Doesn't do like a lot. You're always just like, wow, that's like decent. That's good.
It's but just circling back to what Mystler said, that I actually got my KSM because the group I actually bugged somebody who was trying to finish KSM, and I was playing Assassination at the time, and they said I played the first key with them as Assass. I did okay, and they said, okay man, you have to switch to Outlaw if you want to carry on with us. So I had to switch to Outlaw, and I did, and I got my KSM that way. But truth be told, I did better as Outlaw than Assassination, just because it's a bit more breezy.
Oh yeah,
it's
the spec is definitely way easier for AoE.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Like light and day.
But I had a question for all of you, like just to close it off with this, and it does have to do with borrowed power. And I was going to ask you this: how do you think Outlaw looks like if you take away Soulbinds, Conduits, and Legendaries? Would this spec work without any of these? I mean, I guess the general vibe I'm going with here, are they making these specs intentionally bad to have all of these external things make them complete? Or do you think some specs, like Outlaw in our case, can actually work without celerity and count yards and basically all the external shit? I know it's a tough sell and tough question maybe, but how do you guys see Outlaw bare bones without the external bullshit? I like to call it bullshit. Sorry.
I think Outlaw at its core is like pretty solid. I feel like the one thing I would want, like, I feel like I personally don't have a problem with borrowed power. I think, like, in my opinion, I kind of like when it's like, hey, here's a new expansion, here's a bunch of like fun new tools to play around with. They're not going to be here forever. Enjoy them while you can. Obviously, it sucks when some of them are super good and don't get brought back. Like stuff like count the odds, I think should be made baseline, so that vanish is like an interesting button for Outlaw to be pushing. But like overall, like Outlaw doesn't really gain much from borrowed power, like numerically maybe, but like celerity doesn't really do anything, just gives you damage. Serrated Bone Spike is like super fun, but you can live without it. Outlaw's baseline I think is pretty fantastic. Like while I was leveling, way back, I was like, that's pretty good. I feel like the core for Outlaw is there. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's kind of been the same with tier sets back in the day, which tier sets also like often affected your rotation and stuff, and you knew you only had it for one tier, and you'll probably replace it with the next tier set in the next raid. So I'm not a big opponent of borrowed power or anything like that. And I also don't think it affects the spec or how it feels to play the spec very much. Especially not the Covenant specific stuff, like the Covenant abilities. Yeah, Bone Spike is pretty cool to play with.
I love Bone Spike.
Yep, but it's not essential to the flow of the spec, and even less so all the Soulbind stuff. The Conduits are spec specific, so something like Count the Odds would be kind of nice. Same for the Legendaries, but I don't think there's anything like that. Yeah, this feels very essential. I think the artifact powers in Legion felt more essential than anything in the current expansion now.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's definitely like a sliding scale for borrowed power. I think like Legion was crazy. Legion had so much stuff. Compared to BFA, like BFA had like a good amount, but like to me, like essences were mostly irrelevant. Like they were just kind of like passives that just kind of like
Azerite traits, corruptions, come on, baby.
It had like a lot of layers of stuff, but at least for Outlaw, a lot of those stuff like didn't really matter. Like you went like severe versatility stacking, which like doesn't really do anything for like rotation core. The essences didn't really do much. You just press CLF on cooldown, and you just had like a bunch of energy from Lucid. You had like the Azerite traits, which were like hit or miss for Outlaw. So I feel like it's not too bad right now, but
Yeah. What about you, Real Rogue?
I definitely think that Shadowlands, as far as borrowed powers, is definitely the most. They're the most non-invasive. Obviously, the Covenant ability is probably the most noteworthy one, as Bone Spike, as we've all mentioned. Even Flagellation and Echoing Reprimand have some interactions here and there. I mean, Flagellation is kind of press a button, but Echoing Reprimand, you get your little combo point mini game thing. But Bone Spike, you have your resets, and that's kind of fun. But you already had Mark for Death, and back when we did BFA, you had Breath of the Dying, so it's kind of the same idea. That was a really good one.
Yeah.
But I would say, I think Outlaw, I think honestly most of the rogue specs in general would be fine without, like, even if you stripped away Soulbinds and traits and conduits and stuff, none of them are really like, there's no wow factor to any of them. Like, I especially with this new Shard of Domination thing going into the newer stuff with 9.1, I don't feel like any of them are all that, like, when I got, I'm sure you've all felt it, like when you get your 4 set finally and you're like, it's a really good one if you got lucky and they didn't make a terrible 4 set for you. And it was like you had to get it. You were running normal and heroic and whatever raid tier you can get, just so you can get like the cloak or whatever piece you needed because you wanted your 4 set and it was going to change how you played a lot or made a really noticeable difference. Whereas conduits, I mean, it all adds up to a large improvement in damage, but they're all like, okay, you're more likely to roll buffs, or oh, Shiv, I mean, you do slightly more nature damage when you have Shiv active for assassination, or none of them really feel like if those were gone, it would still play virtually the same. And I don't feel that they don't really affect the gameplay too much outside of just the Covenant ability. And even that's kind of negligible outside of Bone Spike spam and Mythic Plus. Because even in raids, if you're one target bone spiking, it's like hit it so you don't cap and so you can put lead by example procs on people, maybe if you're even running that, and that's it, you know.
Yeah.
I think that was in a pretty good place though, I would say overall.
The Covenant abilities also have that part of it that they are designed for the class as a whole and not to integrate with any spec in particular. I mean, there's still advantages like Flagellation works better with sub because sub gets more combo points out. So there's some synergies like that exist, but overall they were designed to just add to the class as a whole and not integrate into any particular spec. So because of that, they also do not feel essential to any spec that much.
Right.
As opposed to artifact weapons.
Exactly.
Yeah, and like there's some specs like Arcane, or not Arcane, Fire in 9.0, where like obviously the whole like shifting power thing kind of like made the spec kind of like, you know, flow properly, where it's like you're getting a million CDR.
Yeah, and the Infernal Cascade conduit too.
Yep.
That was like pretty essential for them.
Yeah.
So
but like some specs had these like hugely essential like tools that like, hey, here's a borrowed power piece that like kind of like makes the spec kind of click. But kind of like since like both BFA and Shadowlands, like all three rogue specs have never really had like a quintessential like super important borrowed power piece. Like obviously it would be nice to keep them, but like for the most part, like most of them are pretty irrelevant. Like the specs foundations are like pretty solid, where with or without these kind of like random, you know, either, you know, tier sets, Covenant abilities, blah blah blah, the specs like basically play the same with or without them. But like Assassination having nature damage with Shiv, it already does that. It just gives you more. It's just a damage number, doesn't really do anything. The only one that's like super impactful are like Stiletto Staccato for sub and like Count the Odds for Outlaw. Yeah, like these are like unnoticeable things really. So like I don't mind the borrowed power for Rogue at least.
Yeah, I mean I think it's a pretty good sign, at least for the rogue.
There are unfortunately specs out there that are kind of need to get fixed with the bar power, and that feels incredibly shit. And it's good that there's some like Outlaw and the other rogue specs that don't feel like they need to use these as crutches.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
I think Rogue is very lucky in that aspect where I don't know how it keeps happening, but every expansion it's just like here's some borrowed power. It also doesn't matter. So have fun next patch. Like
it's pretty. It is true because when researching, you know, a lot of the things for the guides and talking to Mystler and then Whisper for our guides, there was always this general themes. Like when we were talking about, okay, people are always asking, what's the best Covenant? What should I go with the best Covenant? And I kind of, you know, I kind of took the main idea from Mystler. Actually, listen, man, pick it if you like the vibe, the story, the question, you know, anything. It's not really that big of a difference. Like if you want a min-max, sure, look at these numbers, it's fine. And I guess we can give them credit for that because, you know, they did say that it won't be that impactful. At least for rogues, that's the case.
If they continue, if they see this, then that's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, I'm always amazed by how balanced Rogue is. It's kind of weird. I don't know how they do it. Like the Rogue Covenants for Outlaw, I think it's like Kyrian is like 5%, Necrolord is like 3%, Venthyr is like 4%. Like all of these are like micro percentages where it's just like, who cares? Like just play the cool Covenant. You'll do fine. I know people in the sub channel always talk about like, oh, Necrolord's terrible, it can't play Necrolord. And then some guy posted like a 99 like rank 5 log with Necrolord. Like I don't know how they managed to make Covenants like literally irrelevant for Rogue where you can play all of them and be the best. But like good for them, like Shadows.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of overestimating the differences, especially the Rogue community. I think we have a fairly decent theory crafting community with always maintaining stuff and everything, so that we often have this phenomenon that people are like, oh, I found an upgrade, and it's like 0.3%. That's like the first world problems that we're dealing with. Whereas some other specs have like, oh, here's a pull request. It increases its damage by 10%.
Like the Shadow Priest legendary, it's like, oh yeah, you were just using a wrong legendary that's like a 5% upgrade. It's like, oh, okay. And then like we find like 0.2% upgrades from like switching like a talent, a playstyle, a covenant, and a legendary. It's like
so I think running like Raidbot's Top Gear or something and seeing like that something is 0.5% better is a little bit overestimated in how valuable it is. And for many players, it shouldn't probably matter too much to chase these min-maxing things. If you like to do that stuff, of course, you're obviously
go
free.
ahead.
And I think Covenants still have the issue that they can feel kind of bad when you feel like you don't pick the best one. And I would really love to not have this rigid system. But overall, you're still fine picking the one you like best. And I think logging, at least that's my personal thing, I play the Covenant that I like the most because of the zone and the story. And to me, it matters a lot that I log in a zone where I feel comfortable and that I don't hate. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I've cycled through all of them except for Night Fae. I started Kyrian as Outlaw because it was the best. Then they buffed Serrated Bone Spike in 905, and then I play Necrolord, and then I play Venthyr now because I'm playing a little bit more subtlety because of raiding. But I enjoyed my time in all the Covenants. I feel like all the abilities are like cool. I feel like they're not too important. I feel like all of them have their own like cool little quirks and play styles. Yeah, except Night Fae. Night Fae sucks.
Yeah, Sepsis is probably Sepsis is terrible. I was Night Fae for a good chunk. It's just, and then like that. What was that new legendary? Isn't it Toxic Onslaught or whatever it's called?
Yeah.
They gave it. Oh, you get 12 seconds of a random cooldown. I'm like, yeah,
it's not very.
And it only works with half of them. Like Shadowlands still doesn't work with like half of them, right?
Here's the Night Fae sub-bro crying right now.
Oh, are you Night Fae?
Yes.
No way, Mystler, no way.
It's the only Covenant I will never level.
I really like the Covenant. I don't know, but it feels currently bad. The tuning isn't the best one, especially. I mean, it's still perfectly viable.
Oh,
but
it's still like 2 or 3%.
You feel like you're chasing your own potential, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, I just didn't like Sepsis. I just don't find the ability intuitive or really meaningful at all. It's like you hit it, and then 10 seconds later, it does damage. Okay.
Soul Shape is kind of sick though.
Soul Shape is amazing.
Soul Shape is kind of sick.
Yes, I still miss Soul Shape as Necro because like I'm so bad about channeling Fleshcraft. I'll do it at the beginning of a key and then
never again.
If there's RP and or if someone died and we're resing them, that's like the only 2 times.
But yeah, I just want to comment. Door of Shadow is the worst Covenant ability in the entire game. I hate it.
Oh man, I hate it too.
It needs that trait that made it instant cast.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my god, it is so bad.
Oh,
I know there's like an outlaw thing, and like Venthyr's not super good for outlaw, but oh my god, Door of Shadows, I hate that ability.
Yeah, me too. I'm Venthyr too, and I absolutely hate it, especially when I have to do mechanics. But I don't know, it just feels so clunky with the cast time and position it and
It's the kind of thing that is somewhat useful, but it feels kind of bad to use.
Yeah, exactly.
Like on Eye, it's super good. I liked it on Sylvanas, because if you just time the wailing thing, you could like pour it in right when she's finished it, and like that's kind of fun. But like, just make it instant cast, please.
Yeah.
I need that Theotar trait where in beta it's now instant cast that needs to be back. I need that.
Yeah, I don't know why they removed that. Probably because of PvP.
We've just seen a lot of Painsmith progression the past few days. That's kind of a boss where it's also pretty cool, but it's if in the most content when you're just moving from A to B and you want to use it as a movement utility, it often has that feeling of why do I use this to port somewhere where I could just run in the same time?
Yeah, hook, sprint.
Like before flying was in the game, before 9.1, but you could get up to like ledges where there was a treasure or there's an ore on this mountain that shouldn't spawn there, so okay, I can get to it. But now that you're flying, it's like, okay, I'll just...
Except in Korthia where it doesn't work.
In Korthia, it does not work.
It was thought through.
The path thing is
through.
fucked up, You cannot...
Works for Warlocks though, not...
Nope. You put a Warlock gate on top of a tree to get that stupid nest by
the nest, the famous nest on the tree.
Hook doesn't work, door doesn't work, but the Warlock ability always works.
They're biased. I'm pretty sure you're gonna switch to Warlock. He's not playing Shaman anymore, he's Warlock now. So make all the fucking gates work everywhere. Alright boys, well we are close to the end here. And it was a blast. Always love to talk with the Rogue Boys, especially with
awesome.
favorite specs. And we shall do this again. I'm really thinking on after we go into maybe a little bit more of the dust settling, in Mythic Plus and the Raid. So a couple of months from now, we shall go back to this and see how things look, and maybe we'll see some. I'm pretty sure we're gonna see some changes eventually, tunings and whatnot. But these are gonna happen after the Mythic World, Erase the World first. That being said, please go ahead, check out Mystler, the links will be in the description. Check out the Red Rogue, also in the description, and Mr. Guy, who is first time on the podcast, but he's in the same vibe as we kind of usually got from all of the Rogue boys. So definitely a keeper for the podcast. And thank you guys for joining and taking your time to be with us and chat and shenanigans on Outlaw.
That was really cool, really cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
There you go.
All right.
Guys.
Well, we'll see you next week. Are we? Because I'm going to be on
Monday.
vacay. Do you have somebody to talk to?
Yeah. We're gonna have
We
a
have
non-Marcelian podcast. We're gonna go into like unexplored territory, like maybe some shaman stuff. Like I don't know.
Okay. Go ahead. Enhancement would be a really cool thing to do.
Try
But
hitting
anyways,
try hitting up Ward Up. I'm not sure if he. It seems like he'd love to be on that kind of podcast.
it would be amazing. Yeah, you should
We'll
definitely.
see what we can. Word Up usually helps us with the enhancement guides.
Yeah, so he probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Hit him up. I'm sure he has a lot of fun comments on Enhancement Shaman.
Oh, I cannot wait. I'll be here drinking it all and.
Well, if
I just want to see him. I just want to see him talk about Enhance. That's all I want to see.
all right. We'll make it happen. And if it will happen,
Thank
you guys will catch it on next Monday or on some Monday.
A specific Monday.
A specific Monday. Thank you for listening or watching. Once again, you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, all that jazz, or just watch it on YouTube. Just put the video in and just do your thing, make French fries or whatever. Thank you. Don't skip. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Later.
Still I play WoW.